Welcome to Game Developer Video 2 of Series 1. This will be a nice simple video. We'll get Unity, the GIMP, we'll set up a basic scene, which is our level, we'll add Unity's player controller to our scene, and this is what will allow us to move around in the level, and we'll make a lot of modifications to that controller. Then we'll write our very first script called the CameraScript. And then finally, we'll build the game as a standalone exe. Right, so step 1 of 5, let's get Unity and the GIMP. Go over to the Unity website at unity3d.com and have a look at what Unity is about. Now, the normal thing to do would be to just download the latest version of Unity. But for this tutorial series, I've been using version 3.4.0. And while you're following along with this tutorial series, I'd recommend that you use the same version. So to get it, just do a Google search for download previous version Unity. And the first link to a Unity Answers page will be the one. And since I'm using PC, I'll get version 3.4 right here. Yes, it's 3.4.0, and yes, I'd like to keep it. So while it's downloading, do have a look at the support page and have a look at the documentation. I think it's pretty important that you do read up on the basics of the Unity editor. And once you're done with that, go over and download the GIMP. So just do a Google search for the GIMP. If you're not familiar with it, what we'll be doing with the GIMP is creating all our basic textures that we'll be using. Well, whatever is not already available. So just simply click Downloads and download the one that's applicable to you. And once you've downloaded all the software, Unity and the GIMP, install them and launch Unity. Right, we're on to step 2 of 5. And what we'll do is, with Unity open, we'll set up a new scene and create a new project. Okay, I've just launched Unity now. And since it's newly installed, it's asking me if I want to upgrade the version. No, I'll skip it for now. And this welcome screen. Do have a look at the video tutorials, they are helpful. And there are other useful tools as well that you'll be using. So I'll just close that. And what Unity opens up with is their demo project. And this one's called Angry Bots. And it is quite impressive, really. You can actually play it. You just hit this play button. And you can actually run their demo and play their game. So I'll just give it a moment to load up. Alright, so there you go. You have a character. You can move around and shoot the angry bot. So anyway, I'll just stop that because we'll be creating our own project. You can play that in your own time, I guess. And once we create a project, by the way, I should tell you where to find that angry bots. It'll be saved if you're using XP. I'm not sure what will happen for users who are using Vista, but for XP users, it'll be saved in My Network Places. And it'll be under Unity projects on whatever your username is, and there you'll find Angry Bots. So let's actually create a new project. Later on, when you've actually been doing a fair bit of programming with Unity, then when you look at all this, these assets that they've created, and especially the scripts, it'll make a lot more sense. At the moment, this is quite a bit too complicated for someone who has no or very limited experience with programming in Unity or game development. Right, so I'll create a new project now. So File, New Project, and I need to pick a place to save my project. So I think My Documents is fine. I'll just call it, set a new Unity project. I'll call it Gamer to Game Developer. Well, that wasn't very original, but anyhow. And it's also asking me what do I want to import as well as I create it. For now, let's just create a new empty project. So just hit the create button. And no, don't save any changes to AgriBots. We didn't make any though, I think. And it'll just reload Unity. And there we have our empty project. Right, so the first thing that I'll do is, under the project panel, I'll create a new folder. And I'll call it scenes. Scenes are our levels in Unity. We'll only make one major scene throughout this series and another smaller one which we'll use for creating icons, but that's another story for later on. So I'll just accept that, and now I'll just do file, save scene as, and in the scenes I'll name this series 1 prototype. And I've spelled that correctly, and I'll just hit save or just hit enter. So the first thing I'll add to our scene is a plane. So we go to game object, create other, plane. And this will be the floor for our player character. And we'll be using a plane for most of the series until we implement terrain. But that's much, much later on, once we've finished all the main features. So I'll get into the habit of saving straight away. I just hit Control S, or you could just hit File, Save Scene. But you'll find me throughout this series. Probably should have told you that there's an asterisk symbol there, and that just means that the scene isn't saved. So when you see that, you can just hit Control S, and when it's gone, it means that you've saved the scene, the latest changes. And I'll briefly mention what we're looking at here, what we're being presented with. This hierarchy panel here, it shows us what's in the game currently. So it shows us here there's a plane in there, and there's a main camera. And that's what the camera sees. Up here we see a scene view and a game view. So the scene view is like your editor view, which you can move around in the editor mode and just change things. And in the game view, that's what the actual, that's what the player will actually see. And the project panel is, well, it helps you keep organized, and this is where all your assets, your scripts, and so on will sit. And you pull things called prefabs, and you can drop them into your hierarchy to put them into the game. And you can actually edit the properties of objects from the inspector, and you'd attach scripts, and you'd be able to see them here attached in the inspector. And it'll make much more sense as we start building stuff throughout this project. All of this will be, well, it'll just become quite second nature to you. So heading back to the scene view, I can actually double click on the plane in the hierarchy panel and to zoom in a bit. And you can use your mouse wheel to move in and out, to zoom in and out as well. And you can also hold down right click to rotate the camera. And if you hold your right click down and you press WASD, you can move around like in any first person shooter mode. And if you press E, you can move up. If you press Q, you can move down. If you hold right click down and then you hold your left shift down and then you press one of the WASD keys, you can do that same movement except much faster. So that's quite useful when you have a big level and you really need to move around from place to place. It's pretty tedious if you had to do it slowly. So this plane at the moment is pretty small. I'll change the X scale to 100. And I'll change the Z scale to 100. So you can see that I'm changing the size of the plane from the inspector panel itself. You could have also changed it from these little widgets here, these buttons here. You can actually select this one, scale the selected object, and it's a manual scaling, but I wanted precise, so I just entered in the numbers. So once again, I'll just double click on the plane here to zoom out a bit. And at the moment, our level is pitch dark. I mean, there's no light, so that's the next thing that we'll do. We'll just add some light. So we'll go to game object, create other, and select directional light. And at the moment the light is shining parallel to the plane, so that's why it's not lighting it up. So we just need to change its X rotation. I'll just click that to change it back to the the position tool. And we just need to change the rotation to 75, say, for example. And what we have now is the light shining down onto the plane. And it's pretty bright, so I'll just set its intensity down to 0.25. And that's about right for now. We'll also add an ambient light as well to this level. So let's add some ambient light. So head over to Edit, Render Settings, and under Ambient Light, let's just set it to full white. Wow, that is pretty bright, but let's just leave it like that for now. Right, in the game view, I don't want a deep blue boring sky throughout this tutorial series, so let's add a nice skybox. So we go to Assets, Import Package, and look for skyboxes. Right, we import everything. And we'll now have a new folder down here in the project panel called Standard Assets, and within it is our skybox. Now each of these things here that you can see with the grayish looking icon, these are called materials, and you can click on them. You can see the shader type is a skybox, and a skybox consists of 6 textures. And the skybox that we're going to use is Sunny 2. You can go through them and have a look at what they look like, and we might as well apply it right now by going back to our render settings and under Skybox Material choosing Skybox 2, well, Sunny 2, sorry, and that's what it looks like. So let's head back to the scene view, and you can see that it's been applied here too, and yes, this looks much better than having to look at a gray scene throughout this tutorial series. And we have pretty much finished this step now. We've created our basic scene. We've progressed to step 3 of 5, so now we'll add a player controller. Okay, let's add a character controller now. So go to Assets, Import Package, Character Controller. And yes, let's import everything. It'll appear in our standard assets folder when it's done. So I'll just minimize skyboxes and expand character controllers. And the one that we'll be using is the first person controller. And you can see in the inspector, you can actually expand. This is called a prefab. You can expand it. You can see it consists of 2 other game objects, one called graphics and one called the main camera. So back on the first person controller itself, you can see that there are 3 other scripts, and these scripts are placed right here in this sources scripts folder. So you can see mouse look, mouse look. Anyhow, let's actually drag this first person controller into our hierarchy panel. So we've just done that, and this adds it to our level. So we can double click, zoom in on it, and well, that's what it looks like. It's a capsule. And throughout series 1, that is what our players look like. They are just plain old capsules. And what I should do is I should reset the position. I'd like to actually position it in the middle of the level because I will be editing it, and it'll be easier to add other components into it by putting it in the exact center of the level. So just reset position, and it will be sitting in the ground though, so we will move it up. See, we can't have it sticking in the ground because if we hit the play button, oh, and we can actually play, we can play right now, the capsule will actually just fall through the plane. So let me just move it up. we can use this tool right here, this widget, and move it up until it's above the plane. And there it is, right now it is, but I'll just set the position to 1. Throughout the series, I'll always be just setting the position precisely rather than manually. Now let's see what happens if we do hit the play button. So just go to the game view and let's hit play. Okay, so we can actually look around. I'm pressing spacebar so I can see that I'm jumping. I can see that when I move the position is changing, but we can't see anything actually. We can't tell that we're moving because there's no point of reference. It's just all white. It's a perfectly flat plane. So I'll stop playing and I'll add a cube and I'll create a new material, like a yellow, bright yellow material, so we can clearly see the cube and clearly see us moving relative to it. Go back over to the scene view and, well, let's add a cube. So we do game object, create other, cube. And let's just reset its position. And it's currently sitting in the player controller, but I'll move it in a bit. Let's now actually create a new material. So I'll just minimize these folders. And I'll make a new folder. And I'll name this folder Materials. And just hit enter. Oh, if you need to change the name of something, you just click on the name gently and you can change the name, or you can just hit F2 and you can also change the name. So now within the materials folder, I'll right click on it, create, and I'll create a new material, and I'll just name this one yellow. And I won't assign a texture. All I'll do is I'll just simply change its color. I'll pick a sort of yellowy, goldish color. Okay. Something not too putrid, I guess. Okay, that should work. And I'll change the shader type. Currently it's diffuse. I'll change it to specular. This makes it shiny. And I can change the specular color. So just for the sake of it, might as well just make it bright. And you can see here down in this preview panel that it does change as we move it around. And if you increase the shininess, the more you increase it, first it starts to look more metallic, and then it'll start to look more plastic. Okay, but we've created our material now, and we need to assign it. So let's click on the cube. We can see here under Mesh Renderer, Materials, so just expand that. And we have their default diffuse is the currently assigned material. So just click on it, and let's change it to our new material, yellow. Okay. In moving this cube away from the player, I'll first move it up. So since the scale in Y is 1, I'll need to move it up by 0.5 to make it sit level with the plane. So I'll just type in 0.5, hit enter. Oh, and that's kind of silly of me. I'm actually changing the rotation, so I'll set that back to 0. And I'll go to the proper place, position, and change that to 0.5. And I'll also move it out of the player. So let me just move. I'll just use I'm holding down my mouse wheel. I'm just holding it down so I can pan the camera. And you can see that the player is actually sitting exactly inside the cube. Now I can use these arrows here. The blue one is the Z axis. It's the forwards direction. The red one is the X axis. So I guess it's lateral. And the green is the Y, up and down. So I'll just move it. I guess I'll move it in front of the player. So what's the player? Yeah, so the player will see it in front of them. So maybe let's put that to something like 10. a distance of 10 away. Okay. And while we're at it, I think I might as well just change the player's appearance as well to the same as the cube. It'll make it easier to see if we're observing from the scene view. So just head over to the player controller. Under graphics, just change the default diffuse material to the yellow. Okay. And okay, well, I guess that looks vaguely more interesting. Now, if we were to make any changes to our material yellow, so let's say, for example, I suddenly changed it to purple or something, you'll see that both of the, well, everything that has that material assigned will get updated. So I'll just undo that, Control Z, and go back to the yellow. Okay, so we can actually go ahead and play the game now. So just hit the game tab and hit play. So we've been spawned into the game. We can see the cube in front of us, a funny little cube. And you'll notice immediately that we can't walk through it, which is what we would expect. Now the reason for that is because the cube has something called a collider attached to it. If we were to disable the collider, we'd be able to walk right through the cube, which you can see what we're doing right now. Now actually, to see that better, why don't I separate the game view from the scene view? And I guess while I'm at it, I'll move this hierarchy panel over here. I'll move the project panel over there. And yes, the console. Oh yeah, it's telling us all sorts of stuff. It's been saying there are 2 audio listeners in the scene. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So let's just put that down there. Right, so this is an easier to use layout now. It does mean that our views are a bit smaller, but when you're actively developing, it's much easier to see the effects of what you're changing while you're running the game. So for example, now that I'm moving around in the game view, you can actually see the player moving around in the scene view, so you know what it looks like. And you can see that the player is just walking right through the collider. Now, I should enable it, but since I disabled the box collider while we were playing, if I stop playing now, you'll see that it gets re-enabled. So that's something to remember, that while you're running the game, if you make any changes to the game object's properties, like its position or the collider or something like that, it won't get saved once you stop playing. So that's something to note down. So if you change the position, you're better off copying the object and then pasting it in after you stop playing, or just writing down what the changed properties are. If you change the material though, that does get saved. It doesn't seem to fall under that. So now about the audio listeners message that we were getting. Now that's because our main cameras, they have an audio listener component attached to them. And the audio listener is what allows you to hear sound. So if you implement sound into the game, then you'll hear it from the audio listener. And we should really only have one active at any time in the game. So the one that we will disable, we will delete the one in the player. We're going to write a script that'll make this main camera follow the player around. Now if you disable this main camera in the player, you'll see the effect straight away. You can see now that the view and the game view has suddenly changed because we're looking from the other camera. If we just re-enable that, it starts now looking through the eyes of the player. And by the way, the reason why we're actually having only one camera, why we're going to get rid of this camera, is because when we move to multiplayer, we'll have a whole heap of players in the game. So by having only one camera, we don't run into the problem of unnecessary load, and also figuring out whose camera is whose, or etc. in the multiplayer while it's in multiplayer. And I mean, if all the other players have their cameras, you don't need their cameras. You only need one camera to do all the seeing. If you have lots of cameras, then you just put unnecessary load. So we will be making quite a lot of changes to our player controller. So for that reason, create a new folder and call it prefabs. So prefabs. And we'll create, so right click, create a new prefab and name it player. Now our first person controller in the hierarchy panel, take it and drag it into this empty prefab. You can see that it's just gray at the moment. That means it's empty. So drop it in and it becomes blue. And we now have our own prefab. And by doing this, we won't overwrite the one that we've been supplied with. So I'll delete it from the hierarchy panel. So just hit delete. And now I'll drop our own prefab in, and there we go. It's back in, and the name is player. We'll create a new empty game object now. Just go to game object, create empty. And this game object, we'll name it, well, first let's just reset its position. So it sits, we're going to put it inside the player, and we're just going to call it camera head. This is just a dummy game object that we'll be using, so I'll explain this in a bit just after we're finished with our player controller, what it's for. And the purpose is that we're going to make our camera follow this dummy game object, and that'll serve as the first person view for our player. So let's just rename it something like camera head. Doesn't matter what you call it, just has to be something you can remember. And we're going to change the position. We need to make it sit at where approximately, well, eye level for a capsule, I guess anyway. And I think it's about there. It's about 1.3, I think. So let's try that. We can move around. Yes, we can see that it is sitting in the player. And we'll actually put it inside the player now. So just grab the camera head and drop it into the player game object. So we'll lose prefab. Yes, we want to continue, and yes, we want to lose that connection because we're going to save our new prefab. So even though we put camera head here, it hasn't been updated back in our project panel. So just click on the player again and you'll see this prefab button, and just hit the apply button. And that will save the changes, and you can now see that the camera head has been placed inside. And by the way, when we put the camera head in, you'll notice that its Y position is different. That Y position is now relative to the capsule itself rather than being relative to the world space. So before it was 1.3, when we dropped it in, it became 0.3. As a final step for this bit of the video, I'll actually just delete this main camera on the player. Just select it, delete, and I'd say that now we're ready to move on to writing our first script. So I'll actually explain what we're about to do. We've progressed on to step 4, and now we're on to the more exciting stuff, which is to write our first script called the CameraScript. So how will our script function? Well, what we're going to do is, we've already added our camera head to the player, which is just our reference. It's just a dummy game object. Now what we are going to create is we're going to create the camera script. And this script, we'll actually attach it to the player. And what the script is going to do is it's going to search for the camera, the main camera, find it, and then every frame, so every update, it's going to tell the camera, okay, you camera, have the same position as this object called camera head. And that'll effectively make the camera sit inside the player. To do that, we'll be editing the transform of the camera. So from the transform, we can actually edit the position, we can edit rotation, we can edit scale. So by doing so, we'll be able to get a first-person perspective, and we'll only have one camera in the game. And later on, when we have multiplayer, we'll have this camera recognize, we'll have the script recognize that it belongs to the player who owns this multiplayer gaming session. So all the other players, they'll also have their own camera scripts, but because they don't own this multiplayer gaming session, they won't be able to control that camera. Only the player who owns the session. So let's move on to actually creating that script. We go back to Unity now, and let's create a new folder and call it scripts. And we'll place all the scripts that we make in this folder. And in the folder now, right click on it, create, and make a C# script. We'll be coding in C#. And call it CameraScript. Now let's say, for example, I make a mistake with the spelling. I'll just do that now. So let's say I said CameraScript or something like that, and hit enter. So our new script will have been made. We can see its contents here. We can see that it says something like using Unity engine, using system.collections, public class, CameraScript. So it's recognized the name of the file, and it's called this class CameraScript. And what it's saying is that this class is modifying mono behavior, which I'm not sure what the proper term is, but I guess it's the main class. This is what the Unity team has developed, and it's full of other subclasses and features, which we then go ahead and modify slightly to make our own behaviors. And then we also see here a start function and an update function. Whatever code we write in the start function, that'll be executed when the game object loads up for the first time in the game. And whatever is written in the update function, every single frame, like it says here, update is called once per frame. So every frame, that bit of code is executed. Now let's open up that script. Well, actually, no. First, let me just change the name here. So I'll just click on it and change it to the correct name, which is script. And you'll see that it's not updating here, and we will have to update it. If we don't update it, then this script will throw up an error. So to update it, let's open it. So just simply double click it, or just right click and hit open. And it will open up in an editor called MonoDevelop. Alright, we have it open now. And, well, personally, I find MonoDevelop to be an outstanding editor, and it's really well integrated with the Unity game engine. It's probably one of the main reasons why I use Unity. So, coming back to this, so let's just correct that and call it CameraScript. So that's the correct name for the class. And when you see here, if you see a yellow color, it means any of that code written has not been saved. So if you hit Control S and just save, it'll turn green. And if you head back to Unity, you will see that in the preview panel that it has actually updated. So let's just go back to our script. And let's actually start typing some code. The first thing I'll do is I'll add some comments, a summary describing what this script is or what it's attached to. So I'll just put in 3 forward slashes, and that sets up a summary. And I'll just type here, this script is attached to the player. Oops, not a... And I guess what the script does, and it causes the camera to continuously follow the camera head. And then the next thing to do under the class area before the functions, and we'll be writing lots of, by the way, about functions, we'll write lots of our own functions throughout this series. And it's in the functions where you execute bits of code. But before that, we need to declare some variables. And I'll put 2 forward slashes. So this is a single line comment. And I'll just say variables start. And then I'll just put a whole lot of underscores. This is just for, well, in my view, in my eyes, tidiness. Though I guess for other people, maybe it's just a distraction, really. Now I'll just add in our variable. So I'll say private. So it's a private variable. It's only accessed within the script. So I can't have another script come and access the variable. And the type of the variable, I'll call it camera. Well, I'm not calling it. It is camera. And I can just press tab to autocomplete, or you can double click on it here to autocomplete. So private camera, my camera, and this is the bit that I'm naming. This is what I'm calling it, my camera, so it's going to act as our quick reference. And then I'm going to add another variable, private transform. So this class will be a transform. There it is. I'll just press tab to autocomplete. And I'll name it camera head transform. That's just what I'm naming it. So I have now 2 empty variables. One is of a type camera and the other is of the type transform. And that's all the variables I'll have for this script. So variables and yeah, you don't have to write these bits. They're just comments. They don't actually have any effect on the code whatsoever. But I just do it just because I like to. And then under void start, so this is our start function. I'll just bring this parenthesis down. Yes, so that's a opening one parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. So you'll find that functions are enclosed, the code within it. A code block is within the parenthesis, and when you have if statements or loops, you'd also enclose the code within them inside parentheses. So I'll type here now, my camera is equal to camera, well, I'm not sure if equal to is the correct term here, but camera dot main. So what it'll do is it'll find when this script is executed for the first time, it'll find the main camera. That's all I'm telling it to do. And this my camera here variable is just simply acting as a reference to it. That's all. And I'm not making any use of it yet. I'm just creating the reference right now in the start function. And for the camera head transform, so camera head, okay, there it is in autocomplete. Just hit tab. I'll assign transform dot find child. Now the reason for this, so let me just head over to Unity. Now this player here, the camera head within it is a child game object, and we're going to attach a new script here. We're going to attach the CameraScript here. So what it's going to do is we're saying find child, and we're going to say find child camera head. So it'll know then, oh, okay, it must be one of the objects within me, and we'll see, oh, camera head, and find it. So that's what I'm doing right now. So find child, and have brackets, quotation mark, and then write the string camera head. So you need to remember the exact name, or you could have just clicked on camera head and copy pasted, Control-C, and just come back here and pasted it in. I just did Control-V there. And then close off the quotation and close the brackets. And then put a semicolon. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to say that. At the end of your line of code, don't forget to put a semicolon. If you do forget, it's also not a problem. It'll throw up an error, and it's, I guess, a fairly common mistake to make, so you'll quickly figure that one out. Okay, let's save the code that we've written so far. I'll just hit Control S, and you can see it's gone all green. So let's type out the code in the update function. Oh, and the only reason I'm just moving the parentheses down is, I guess, just to make it look more tidy. Depends who you are. I mean, you don't need to leave spaces like I'm doing. I just do it because for me, I find that easier to read. So I'll write here a comment, what this then bit of code is about to do. And I think it's a good idea to write comments, especially when you don't look at a piece of code that you've written and you come back to it. I mean, after a long time you haven't seen it, and then you come back to it, it can be a bit difficult to understand what the purpose of that code that you wrote is. So I've just gotten into the habit of writing comments after I've made sure that the code works. So make the camera follow the player's camera head transform. So this thing, which is the camera head. And to do that, all we do is my camera dot transform, and within the transform of the camera, of my camera, we can access the position. So there we go, position. I'll just hit tab, is, well, we'll assign to it the position of camera head transform. So camera head transform dot position, and our semicolon to end that line. So what we've just said there is every frame make the camera's position the same as that of camera head. And we'll also need to make sure that the rotation gets updated every frame as well. So my camera dot transform, and within transform, rotation is equal to camera head transform dot rotation, and end that. And I'll save the script and head back to Unity. So now, well, I guess the sensible thing to do now is to attach the script. So we can, you can see that if we click on the script, we can see that it's all updated, and we can actually just drag the script and drop it in. But instead of doing that, I just moved it. So I'll just move it back into the scripts folder. Instead of doing that, I'll go to Components, Scripts, and attach our CameraScript. And there we have it now. Okay, we can run the game now, see what happens. So if we hit play, yes, we can see that the main camera, if you look, main camera is sitting inside the player. So if we move around, yes, the main camera is in fact following the player, but there's a problem. We can only look side to side. We can't look up and down, but that's easily fixed. So let's just stop playing. So just go back to our player, select it. Now in component, go to camera control. Oh, well, not to the player, sorry, to the camera head. So select the camera head, go back to component, camera control, and attach mouse look. So it's this very script, mouse look script. And at the moment it has axes, mouse X and Y. We only need Y because we just need to look up and down. We don't need the side to side rotation as well. So I'll just put mouse Y. And now let's run it and see what happens. Yes, we can look, you can see what's happening with the main camera. You can see that it's rotating. We can look up and down now. All with that one camera, which follows our player around. Okay, so that is working. So I'll just stop playing it right now. And let's save the changes that we've made so far to our player. So you can see that the one in the project panel is really out of date. So let's just have with the player selected, hit apply, and there we go, it's been saved. And we can see that our player has the CameraScript, and under camera head it has the mouse look script. Now we're in the while we've been editing our player, I think I might as well just change its scale now. I'm going to make the player smaller, so that way when we later on add in a terrain, the terrain doesn't need to be as massive. So I'll simply change the scale of the player to about half. So I'll set the X scale to 0.5. I'll set the Y scale to 0.4. And I'll set the Z scale to 0.5 as well. So you can see the players become, well, a lot smaller. And I'd also like to change the gravity setting for our player. So when we jump, this is just a personal preference, but I like having more airtime for our player. So it's under movement, and we can change quite a lot of things. We will change these by script later on, this movement speeds. So we can change here the gravity to, instead of 20, I'll change it to 10. This is just my own personal preference. Otherwise I might forget to do that a bit later on. And I should really save the scene, so hit Ctrl S. And I'll also edit the main camera. So I'll just I'll apply the change that I just made to the player. Now moving on to the main camera, so let's just have a look at this now. Now there are some things that we will be changing. For example, the clipping plane, the near one, we're going to reduce that down. At the moment it's at 0.3. So what it's saying is that anything that's 0.3 or less units close to the camera, that's within that range of the camera, that won't be rendered. So it won't be visible. You won't see it. So we're going to reduce that down to 0.1. And really, why not? Let's just play the game, run it, and see what the effect is by changing. So for example, the field of view, that'll make things more skewed or less skewed, but you'll be able to see more. So if I increase the field of view immensely, you can see that everything looks really distorted now, but you can see much more. And I'll just set it back right down to 60. That was a bit much. And if I change the clipping planes, so let's say I set 100, let's see what happens. So you can see that everything within 100 units is not rendered. So let's just set back that down. Well, set it to 0.1. That's what I'd prefer. And yes, everything is being rendered nicely. And the effect of the clipping plane will make more sense if I run into the block. Now because I set it to 0.1, just watch the top left corner of the screen there. So let's put it back to say 0.3 and look at what happens. See? Now that because it's a bit too big, because we're using it's a very wide screen view, we can actually see through the block, and we don't want that to happen. So that's why I've actually set the clipping plane down to 0.1. And so now that I've done that, I don't have that issue. Though I imagine if I made the screen wider and wider and wider, I'd eventually come into that problem again. Now there's another thing. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but because the frames per second are really high, so we can actually see that. You just click on stats, and you can see that my game is running at like 100 frames per second. We're having some texture tearing, so that might not appear so clearly in the video, but when you run the game and you're running in the editor, you can see like it looks a bit choppy in the editor. When you actually create the game, you won't have that problem, because I'll just stop playing here. Go to edit. Oh, and just before I do that, let me just set the camera to 0.1. Remember what I was telling you? When you make the changes, they're not saved. So make sure to just change that to 0.1. And we go over to edit. Project settings, quality. And we can expand some of these and you'll see something called VSync. Yes, and as the description says, it tries to limit it does limit the refresh rate to avoid tearing of the textures. So when you actually make one, which we're going to do at the end of this video, we'll make a standalone version of our game. And when you run that, you won't have the texture tearing issue. And the very last thing I'm going to do is for the player, I'm simply going to move their position down to 0.5. So they're closer to the ground so they don't drop a long way when they spawn. And really that's really it for video 2. The next step would be to actually build a game as a standalone exe. So we've progressed to our last step, 5 of 5, which is to build a game as a standalone exe. Okay, back in Unity now. Let's just save whatever the last changes we made to our player were. So I'll just hit the apply button and I'll save the scene. And then I'll go to File, Build Settings. And in Build Settings, I'll add our current scene. So just click Add Current. So there you see it. Now I'll select which platform I want to deploy to, and that's Windows. And I just need to sit, build, and run, and it'll ask me where I want to save it. And I'll just create here a new folder called Built. And within it, I'll name the game, I'll just call it GTGD Series 1 Prototype. So that's the name of the actual file, what the player would see. So hit save, and then it'll actually compile and build it and run it. And you can select which screen resolution you want and what quality graphics. I'll just keep it to 1024 by 768 and I'll just have it windowed. So I hit play. Well, and there we have it. We have our game built in a standalone executable. And the graphics are considerably better. Well, there's not really much to look at, but they're sharper anyway in the standalone versus the editor. And, well, that's it for video 2, really. So thanks for watching. I mean, what we completed in this video, we set up a basic scene in Unity. You got exposed to what it feels like to do some programming in Unity. And we wrote our first script, the CameraScript, so that we have the one camera following the player around. And in the next video, we'll move on to implementing our first weapon. It'll be a basic blaster projectile. So see you then. Thanks for watching.